Okay, so let me just walk down the panel here with some brief introductions. Next, we've got Ryan Torrens, a Tampa native who owns his own law practice focusing on foreclosure defense and consumer protection litigation. He represents consumers in claims pursuant to the Federal Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, Fair Credit Reporting Act, and Telephone Consumer Protection Act. Mr. Torrens previously worked as a consultant on the Independent Foreclosure Review Project, and he graduated from George Washington University Law School.
Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Torrens, and I am running on the Democratic ticket for Florida Attorney General. And I must admit that I'm not a member of the Federalist Society. But with that said, I was very pleased and delighted to receive the invitation, and I am happy to be here. We all know that a free and civil exchange of ideas is one of the things that makes our democracy so great. And so I am delighted to be here on this panel with the members of the Federalist Society to debate these important issues today. I am a consumer protection attorney based out of Tampa, and what I do is I fight for people in foreclosure. I fight for their rights, and I sue banks, debt collectors, and mortgage servicers when they violate our consumers' rights. The reason that I am running for Attorney General is because I feel very strongly that for too long, big corporations and special interests in this country and in this state have ruled the day. I feel that it has been far too long since our consumers, regardless of political persuasion, have had a champion in their Attorney General's office. I want to be their champion. I've been traveling this state for the last 7 months in this campaign, and what I have heard all the way from North Florida to South Florida is that people are tired of partisan politics, they're sick and tired of labels, they're tired of pandering. They want an Attorney General who's not going to take the big, dirty corporate money and who's actually going to fight for them. They're tired of the labels. And when I'm your Attorney General, I'm going to be their champion. I am proud to report that I am not accepting money from Big Pharma. I am not accepting money from big banks, big insurance companies, because when I'm the Attorney General, I'm going to fight for our consumers. That's going to be my top priority. Thank you so much for having me here. I look forward to the debate. Thank you.
What would be your motto as the chief legal officer of the state?
My motto would be one set of rules and equal enforcement of our laws. Over the last 7 months, another thing that I have heard from voters again and again and again is that they feel that there's two sets of laws. So someone goes to a Circle K and steals a Snickers bar, surely they're going to get hauled off to jail. But yet some big companies can commit mass financial crimes in the state of Florida and get away with it. And voters of all political stripes are sick and tired of there being two sets of rules. And so when I'm the Attorney General, my motto will be, from now going forward, we're going to follow one set of rules. No matter if it's a sex trafficker who's threatening our children, who should be locked up, or if it's a big corporation who's violating our people's rights. If they're going to come into Florida and work with our consumers, they're going to follow our laws. So my motto would be, we're finally going to equally enforce our laws in this state.
All right, thank you. So, Mr. Torrens, let's assume it's the day after Election Day and you won. Knowing that he needs Florida to be reelected, the president gives you a call, not just a tweet. And the president,
wow, that's surprising.
And the president asks you, Mr. Torrens, is there anyone whom you think would make a great U.S. Supreme Court justice? What is that kind of person like?
You guys are going to love my response on this one. I like you guys after all. I actually think Barack Obama would be a wonderful Supreme Court justice.
Cut the mic, Joe.
I really do. And you know what? If Secretary Clinton had won, maybe she would have nominated him to the court. So that's my answer. I really think he would be, but yeah.
Okay, let me ask this third question to anyone who wants to jump in and answer it. So if Attorney General, is there any conceivable situation in which you would refuse to defend a Florida law? Anything as a matter of conscience where you just draw the line and wouldn't defend the case?
I'll chime in on that. So if, I could see a situation where the legislature passes a law that tramples on people's constitutional rights, and if it was my independent determination that the law did in fact trample on their constitutional rights, then I could see a situation where you would decline to enforce it. I'll give you an example. If I was the Attorney General and the legislature passed a law trampling on the constitutional rights of our LGBT community, I will not tolerate that, and I would decline to defend that law. So in that type of a circumstance, I can see where you would decline to defend the law. Hopefully that would not happen very often, but I would not tolerate with especially insular minorities being discriminated against in this state. You're supposed to be the Attorney General for all Floridians, not just those Floridians who you think to be the right Floridians.
So now, recently, U.S. Attorney General Sessions announced that DOJ was stopping this cypre practice and giving settlement funds to third-party groups. And as he said, I quote, "Any settlement funds should go first to the victims and then to the American people, not to bankroll third-party special interest groups or the political friends of whoever is in power." So my question for you is, do you agree with his statement? And would you institute a similar policy if you became Florida Attorney General?
Sure. Comment, and let's take this one further. When you're out in Florida and trying to let people know what the Attorney General is, for a lot of regular citizens, it's a confusing prospect. But taking it one further, if you bring up the name Eliot Spitzer, it gets a reaction, and sometimes for different reasons. But not the least of which, especially for those involved in capitalism, is the understanding that the Attorney General can be one of the most dangerous positions of authority in any state, one that uses it as a turnstile for rogue plaintiffs' firms to extract funds out of anyone with deep pockets. Schneiderman's continued the tradition in New York. I think the man's name is Hood in Mississippi, and have created extremely difficult, tortious situations in those states. This office cannot be used for that type of abuse. So in furtherance of that dynamic, we have to be very clear that that ain't gonna happen in Florida.
Yes.
Make a comment on that. I think we need to make it very clear that there is a big difference between making it difficult for capitalism, so to speak, and aggressive consumer protection. And I think a lot of times when we look at other attorneys general around the states, in other states who are aggressively protecting our consumers, who are aggressively bringing enforcement actions that need to be brought to protect their people, that they are somehow anti-capitalist. In those states, we don't see situations with massive job losses because of that. We don't see economic downturn because of that. So the idea that if you're going to aggressively and zealously fight for our consumers and bring these actions that need to be brought, that you are anti-capitalist, I'm about as big of a capitalist as you're going to find. But I also believe in the fundamental principle that our consumers need to be protected. And if some of these big companies need to be sued, then they need to be sued. And that's not Democrat or Republican, that's just what's right. But to echo a comment by Judge Moody, I tend to agree actually that there is a concern getting with the Cypre Awards that there's a potential there for rewarding political donors and special interest groups, and getting into pay to play and quid pro quo and all that. I think that is a real concern, and I agree with Mr. Spano as well that the priority in those types of cases always needs to be making the actual plaintiffs whole and making sure that they're entitled to a full recovery, and in circumstances where there are excess funds, to make sure that those are used wisely and not in a way that would just reward our biggest political donors.
So any follow-up comments you have kind of in the tort reform area?
I would say it doesn't maybe necessarily directly go to that, but I would say just generally speaking, I think that that we need to be careful with utilizing so much outside counsel in the AG's office. I think we've gotten a little bit probably unbalanced in that regard, and I know there are some areas that have to be handled by by attorneys outside with a high degree of knowledge in a certain area. But I think for the most part, we have attorneys within the Attorney General's office that have the wherewithal and the skill to be able to handle these cases. So that would be one thing I would say on that issue.
I'll follow up on that. And I really hate it when one of my Republican colleagues makes an excellent point, but Mr. Spano just did. And this is something that I've been researching and studying for some time now, which is, like he just pointed out, the excessive spending by our state government on private attorneys. In some cases, in excess of $800 per hour. The state of Florida spending approximately $40 million per year for private attorneys. We're all lawyers here. We know how some private attorneys can bill for every minute that they think about a case. And I think that our taxpayers, all of us, are getting ripped off. And I think that there needs to be a cost-benefit study done by our next Attorney General, which I believe will be me, to see the cost savings we can have by bringing a lot of this work in-house and placing these lawyers on a salary instead of shopping all this work out to private attorneys. I think we could have some real cost savings by doing that, and that I share the concern there.
Okay, we got one more question, then we're going to turn to some panelist questions for each other. So let's go back to U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions. He recently rescinded the Cole Memorandum that had limited federal enforcement of marijuana laws. Now, Attorney General Sessions described this move as a return to the rule of law. Yet, Colorado's Republican Senator Cory Gardner said the issue must be left up to the states. On the website of Florida Department of Health's Office of Medical Marijuana Use, it states in bold print, medical marijuana is still available in Florida, however, remains illegal under Florida law. So if you were Attorney General, how would you resolve this issue?
Yeah. On this issue, look, the people of Florida have spoken, and their vote should count, and it should be properly implemented and enforced. And as the next Attorney General, I will do everything in my power to protect Florida patients who are using medicinal marijuana per Florida law and who are doing it within the confines of that law, and businesses in Florida who are operating in this industry, some of who have taken on loans and investments in reliance on this law. I will do everything in my power to protect them from federal encroachment.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move now to the last section of our time, which is the panels having the opportunity to ask each other questions. A couple things about this. We'll have enough time, it looks like, for 2 rounds. And I'd ask you to only ask one other panelist a question in each round, right? So we're not getting all the questions directed towards one person. So if we can try to spread out the questions, that would be preferable.
Golly. I got a nice smile from the gentleman, Mr. Torrens there. So in that case, Mr. Torrens, you've been a part of this panel today. You're from the Tampa area, is that correct?
That's right.
You're probably very familiar with some of the positions taken by, for instance, your competitor to the left today and prior. What positions and what commonalities do you find that you share with Judge Moody?
What I've said before, and I'll say it again, is it's a great question. But look, I'm here running as my own man. I have my own ideas. I have my own proposals. I know there's debate and discussion in this Republican primary about who the real conservative is and that type of thing. But I'm here running on the Democratic slate with my own proposals, and so I don't know if I have anything in common with Judge Moody or not. But I'm just proud to be here running on the Democratic ticket with my own ideas in my own proposals and running as my own man. So I'll just stand by that.
All right, Mr. Torrens, if you have got a question for Representative Spano.
Sure. I actually have a question for Mr. White, if that's okay.
Sure.
It's fine by me.
Great. I don't like to follow the rules. So, Mr. White, my question for you is, it was brought to my attention that you have accepted more contributions from large pharmaceutical companies in this race than any other candidate in this race. Given that, will you take a pledge today to sue the big pharmaceutical companies if you are elected Attorney General to recoup the state of Florida's cost and to hold the big pharmaceutical companies responsible for their role in this opioid crisis?
I would applaud General Bondi and her leadership on this issue. I'm not privy to the discovery. I do not have subpoena power as a lone member of the Florida House. But if there was wrongdoing, and I think it's clear that there likely was by some, particularly in the opioid crisis, where there's a lot of smoke. I bet there's some fire there, where the manufacturers and distributors of some of those products, that there is liability. So I'm watching General Bondi's good work from the sidelines and look forward to seeing what she is able to do.
All right, we do have time for another round, so let's start up the other end of the table with this one. So, Judge Moody, if you've got a question.
I know that Representative Fant in his last campaign had made a pledge to refrain from attacking other Republican candidates and make it a race about the merits, and he actually ran on that. That was one of his campaign priorities. And that has changed within the last couple of years, I see, as I have been repeatedly attacked early in this race. And I was wondering how you reconcile that with your earlier pledge from your previous race.
What an interesting question. A couple of thoughts there. My good friend Representative Renner and I over here did sign a pledge to behave in our primary race and still managed to have a nice healthy debate during that process, and one in which was well recorded in Jacksonville. What, as a newcomer to partisan politics, Judge Moody, I'll have to share with you that the issues matter. And just because the issues make you feel uncomfortable doesn't mean that you're being attacked. I might also add, I'm not the only campaign that has discussed this contrast. There is more to this. So if you're going to support a Bill McBride over Jeb Bush, we're going to talk about it. If you're going to have a history of suing Donald Trump, we're going to talk about it. If you have alliances with liberals within the Florida bar, we're going to have to talk about it. These are not attacks. This is
misleading
contrast.
Campaign flyers from multiple campaigns are attacks. Misinformation from multiple campaigns are attacks. And I would just ask that all campaigns, when disseminating information, make sure that it is factually based before disseminating any information, because those are unfounded attacks.
And are you talking about mailers?
I'm talking about mailers. I'm talking about attacks in this race that are unjustified, misinformed, and misleading. I believe that we need to stick to the facts. We need to stick to what makes us conservatives. We need to stick to keeping the debate true among Republicans and not attacking unjustifiably in any primary.
So are you suggesting that you did not support Bill McBride over Jeb Bush? Are you suggesting you did not sue Donald Trump?
I am suggesting,
are you suggesting you do not
and before we get
have
into multiple
bar?
questions, what I am suggesting is the information that has been disseminated is misleading.
What information is that?
And before we get into more questions,
go
and I
ahead
would be more than happy to take these off the record, which I have responded to.
We'll
But
let
I
Judge
just-
Moody respond to that, and then we'll move to your question for the next round, Representative.
It is important that we all remember as voters that information and facts are important. I was in litigation with President Trump years ago regarding a condominium development that never came to fruition. That has nothing to do with me being a conservative or me supporting our president and his conservative agenda in Washington. And to put forth information and mailers that would say otherwise, to give yourself name recognition or a leg up in a primary is just unworthy of the office of Attorney General.
So Representative Fant, you've got the next question to a panelist.
Okay, well, I'll have to come back to this. I'll certainly state that I have compiled no mailers in my campaign. You may be referring to another campaign at this table, and you can direct those questions to them. But I'm yet to understand what is inaccurate about anything that has been represented by me about the fact that you have sued Donald Trump for fraud. I know you don't like it, but it is a fact, and it's a part of campaigning. And so ultimately, this is what we do in the big leagues. And these campaigns get difficult, and it won't get any easier from here when the grassroots gets out there involved in this type of affair. Ultimately, it is our jobs when we run for office to understand where politicians are different. You and I are different. You sued President Trump, I campaigned for President Trump.
I'm trying to discern where the question is. Is the question, what did I mean when I was saying misleading?
You've said I've made a misleading statement
Correct.
about your campaign.
I'll give an example.
I'll give the
Many
specific
things
example.
that, excuse me?
Give the specific
Many
example.
things that went out said that I was not supportive of our Second Amendment rights. I am very much supportive of our Second Amendment rights. I am the only one, the only candidate that has actually done an order that protected someone's Second Amendment rights when they were trying to defend themselves. And I have to say, when someone says, welcome to the big leagues, what that should scream out is, this is partisan gamesmanship and politics.
Thank you. All right, we're down to the last minute. Representative Torrens, or Mr. Torrens, you have a question for the panelist?
Sure. But before I ask the question, I just want to make a quick comment. You know, the spat that we just saw a few minutes ago, this is exactly why I'm running for Attorney General. Because what I've heard for 7 months is that people of all political stripes are tired of that. While we're arguing about who's liberal, who's the true conservative, who sent mailers, who didn't send mailers, our consumers are getting the shaft. And it's been going on for a really long time. So when I'm the Attorney General, I'm going to be the one who acts like the adult in the room and actually gets to work fighting for consumers. Now, with that said, yes, I do have a question for Mr. Fant. Representative Fant, do you believe that members of Florida's LGBT community are entitled to the same legal protections as everyone else, or lesser protections?
Sure, they are entitled to the exact protections as defined to them by law, to answer your question.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that concludes our panel. Let's give them a big round of applause.